Hello everyone and welcome back to the 11th episode of my podcast series, Invested, where I sit down with founders, creators, and business leaders making an impact on this world. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with someone who has been a great resource for me so far on my finance journey, Varun Sharat. After working in high finance and then attending business school, Varun recently transitioned to entrepreneurship as he is now managing what he calls his personal holding company. This Holdco is a fascinating portfolio of businesses that he operates. Most notably, Varun is the founder of Headstart Careers, an industry-leading coaching service and internship placement program that empowers financial and consulting professionals to get the job of their dreams. Varun also advises ultra-high net worth individuals and family offices on activist and special situations, and he has had a successful journey as an angel investor where he has made several successful investments that have grown exponentially in value. Before becoming an entrepreneur, Varun had 6 years of finance industry experience across the sell side and buy side. Before getting his MBA, Varun worked in the investment banking and capital markets group at Wells Fargo, where he was involved in structuring and selling customized foreign exchange and interest rate hedging solutions to corporate clients. Varun began his career with Citibank, where he rotated between the investments, sales, and credit risk groups within the private bank. Varun earned a bachelor's degree from UCLA and an MBA from NYU here in New York City. In addition to exploring Varun's career from private banking to hedge funds, we also discuss his angel investment exit that got acquired for millions of dollars, the misconceptions about Wall Street, and so much more. This was only my second in-person podcast episode, and I loved having the opportunity to connect with Varun in person and feel the energy in the room. I trust you will get the same feeling. And with that, enjoy my conversation with Varun Sharat. All right, well, Varun, thank you so much for coming on here today. We have a lot to talk about. I even have a paper laid out in front of me with all the questions. But before that, can you just walk us through your background? You have a lot going on. Give us a 1-minute summary of your career so far.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. I feel, better for worse. I like to do a lot of different things. So, always was passionate about finance. I, came into the industry. I thought the dream job was, working in sales and trading.
Yep.
Started off in the private bank, made that shift into S&T, which, truth be told, I thought that was like the happiest day of my life. You felt that you made it. And then, went to business school originally at NYU. Thought I wanted to be an investor, working in a hedge fund, doing public markets investing. And then really from there, I realized, I was always passionate about creating something new.
Yeah.
And honestly, for the last 2 years, it's just been building different, you call it side business, passion projects, and just seeing where I can take it.
Yeah. It's amazing kind of just the progression. And for myself, I've already had like a bit of a shift in my career. So I'm curious, like from your own experience, when was it that you knew you wanted to make the shift? You were in the private bank, you wanted to switch to sales and trading, you were in sales and trading, you went to business school, you wanted to go to the hedge fund route. Like, what was kind of the catalyst each of those times to make that pivot?
I think the catalyst was, I think for myself was, I think I was true to myself at that time. I wanted something that was fast-paced, lively, and I hate to say it, when you see the old school Wall Street movies, you see the trading floor, and that's what people picture and envision.
Yeah.
I think timing-wise, it's always tricky. There's no right time to make a move. You're never going to be fully prepared in anything in life. But what I think helped me was the fact that I kind of knew long-term what I wanted to do, and I knew it would take different steps. And I never went into it saying, I have a 10-year plan or a 20-year plan.
Yeah.
It was always 1 or 2 years, learn something new, build out, see the whole business,
right,
gain those crucial skill sets, and then see what excites you and what interests you.
Yeah. So tell me more about private banking and then leveraging that to go into sales and trading. Because I think of private banking, it's obviously very relationship oriented. Of course, certain aspects of it are more technical, more market facing, but I think a lot of it is traditional sales. You're trying to sell yourself, your client management, all of that. Whereas sales and trading is very technical. What was kind of the way that you were able to pivot from private banking to a more technical sales and trading role? I know a lot of people maybe start off in wealth management and they one day want to go more into the front office, into investment banking. I'm curious just like how you were able to do that.
Yeah, no, I think it was a big jump. I mean, coming into, I'd say, private banking and even wealth management as a whole, typically it's very sales focused.
Right.
I was fortunate that Citibank at the time, it was a 2-year rotation program. So you'd spend 6 months I spent 6 months in sales, so shadowing a very senior private banker, going out to different meetings, invites, and so forth. Then I rotated on the credit risk and financial analysis side, which at least at Citi at that time was probably the most interesting group because I really didn't have much of a finance background. I was a geography major, so a lot of things I was learning for the first time. But you go on very esoteric deals. A client was looking to buy a hotel. Clients looking to lend money against, a $300 million boat. So it's a pretty esoteric transactions, which are really unique in terms of that skill set. So I got some of that technical skill set built out. And then the last role was kind of more on the investment sides, kind of asset management, building a traditional portfolio. So I think what helped me was the fact that I got all that exposure. And I think transitioning into sales and trading, I was always actively trading on my own account. I'm guilty of putting options on Nvidia and other.
Well, hey, good for you.
There was some good market timing, good moves there, and it made it fun. And I think I always try to constantly upskill myself. So I'd reach out to different people in the bank. When I was, I've always wanted to work in New York, so I'd always make those trips out to New York to spend time with networking with different people in sales and trading, people in investment banking, try to build those internal relationships, so which always helped me. And then I think what allowed me to make that transition into sales and trading was the fact that they knew I didn't know a lot of the product knowledge, but I could speak intelligently about the markets. You could talk about the macroeconomic movements, what's happening, say with GDP, with inflation, and really connect and build an opinion.
No, I think that's important, and of course to have the confidence to go into those calls and really be able to share your opinion. You mentioned earlier kind of the image of Wall Street. Maybe it's a little bit more traditional and it's not what it looks like anymore. But talk about your childhood. What was your childhood interest? Did you always want to work in finance? What was the background there that kind of made you go this path? You said you were a different major in school, so what changed between when you're picking your degree and now where you are?
Sure. I think, if I have to look back at pivotal moments in life, I think what really excited me about finance was, I think, getting introduced to the virtual stock market. Playing the game. It was my history teacher in London, and, my dad, and my uncle did work in the industry, but I think that really made me see that, this can be fun, exciting, and, thankfully at least on the virtual stock market game was pretty decent, so it helps if you're passionate and, you like something and you're good at it. It's kind of a rare sort of trilogy, so to speak. And when I went to, university at UCLA, I was originally a math econ major. And then I felt the math classes weren't so helpful, they're more theoretical, and then I just went into econ, and then I said, okay, let me do econ with a minor in geography, because I'd grown up in 7 different countries. I wanted something that's a little bit more international, geopolitical, and surprisingly, geography had a lot of interesting classes. I mean, I'll be honest, one class was, coloring in the map and labeling the countries, which sounds simple, but that one was an interesting class. But there were other classes where you might be familiar with Jared Diamond, who wrote Gun, Germs, and Steels. He was teaching at UCLA, so we had some pretty intense classes on macroeconomic philosophy. How do you transform development in the third world? Trying to solve large global issues and try to solve them in practical ways, right? Not in a way of saying, okay, you have to raise taxes from 20% to 40%, but trying to find ways where you can do sustainable development. And looking back, I would say that was almost more like maybe the groundwork or framework for impact investing or social development.
I think it's interesting just the overlap between geography and just what you learn and macro investing. I had James Fish back on the podcast a while ago, and he obviously is super honed in on not just the geopolitics, because that affects so much, and we're especially seeing that now, yesterday with Japan and everything. But I think it's just important to to realize that sometimes you can go a little bit of a non-traditional path to get to finance. Speaking of that though, you've accomplished so much in your young career. I'm just curious, like, what advice would you have to somebody to be successful early on? And I know success is defined in a lot of different ways, but you have had a successful career, regardless of how you define the term. So I'm curious, just like what maybe mental frameworks you used, or just what strategy did you use to kind of scale into the career that you've been able to have?
No, I think that's a great question. I think, looking back in my career, I think one of the key things was I was always intellectually curious.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, I'm pretty sure my MD at City could confirm, I was always the person who likes to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Like to learn the inner workings, like to understand how the whole business works.
Yeah.
A lot of times as an analyst, or I'd say even as an associate,
yeah.
people are siloed in their group.
Right.
If you work at a large bulge bracket bank,
yeah.
there are so many different groups, sectors, different teams, and it's real easy to narrow yourself down into one group and make yourself comfortable in a bubble. I think that's one, always being curious. And then I think two, it's the ability just to build relationships. I think a lot of people build relationships and they're generally nice people. I would say a good percentage of people are genuinely nice on Wall Street, but you always have your, quote unquote bad apples. But large part, I think a lot of people just don't keep in touch. Like I try to keep in touch with every contact, right? Once every 3 months, once every 6 months.
Yeah.
Simple, like I always wish people a happy birthday.
Or that's a good one.
Happy, or hey, hope you have a good 4th of July with your family.
Sure.
Simple ways where you can keep in touch with people, and people are appreciative of that, right? Nobody's asking you to send, a $300 wine bottle to someone's apartment.
Right.
Though I think the gesture would be appreciated by most.
Yeah.
But, just small things. And I think the third aspect is, having good mentors.
Yeah.
Having people in senior management or even middle management who are there for you, right? They generally care, and it's a two-way street, right? You have to build the trust, the reputation with them, but once you have that, having advocates who are there kind of as a lookout to help you guide your career.
Yeah. Well, speaking about mentors, how do you kind of frame yourself to be someone who a mentor would want to mentor? Because it is a two-way street. You can't just say, hey, can you be my mentor? It is a time commitment for everybody. And so how are you able to kind of navigate that and show that you were worthy of mentorship? And then I guess how did you choose which mentors were the right ones for you?
Definitely. I think starting off with your first question in terms of finding the right mentors and how do you go about that, I think the easiest way is being first good at your job.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Having the groundwork done, making sure you're at least a middle bucket, right?
Yeah.
May not be a top performer, but people see you, right? You're visible.
Yeah.
So I think I'll give you an example. When I was at Citi, the first rotation was working with a senior private banker.
Yeah.
And I started off very slowly. It took me some time to get used to his style and how he wanted things. But once I got into the groove, and once he felt comfortable with me, it allowed me to push those boundaries further. Yeah. And he was someone that was always positive advocating for my career in the sense that he knew I wanted to eventually move to New York. So he's like, why don't you make a trip out to New York?
Yeah.
Like, it could be a business trip, get some work done, but I'll make sure I'll connect you to certain people.
Yeah.
So as a junior person, it's really hard to, as a two-way street to show wordiness or value. Sure. Yeah. It's a little challenging. Yeah. I think being a good performer, that's one. I think two, being visible, right? So I'd always volunteer for different company events.
Yeah.
I think one time I pushed myself, was a little too adventurous. I went for a Citi charity bicycle ride. It was Boston to New York.
Really?
3 days.
Okay.
And I got that in my real last minute. But I was in a little bit better shape there than living in New York City, but it was tough. I mean, it was a tough ride, but at the end of the day, a lot of guys appreciate that you're willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you fail, and there's nothing wrong with failing. It's just that most people are really just too scared and they become comfortable.
Yeah.
So I would say in terms of towards your second question, right? Finding the right mentors, like who do you want to be mentored by?
Yeah.
I think you should have many different mentors. I don't think you should just have one mentor.
Yeah, of course.
Each mentor will show you something different, right? Every person has their own success story on how they made it through the organization or how they went through. And that's one thing I think the private bank opened my eyes to, was the fact that a lot of the senior bankers have their own way of selling.
Right.
Their own way of positioning themselves. And even when you would speak to a lot of the clients, a lot of clients have their own way on how they became financially successful.
Yeah.
I remember one client, he owned several car parking lots in Los Angeles. Real mundane sort of business that people would typically ignore. But so I think it's important to have many different mentors. I think the importance is knowing which mentor you want for which specific skill set and which specific area. I think that's sort of something you have to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And, it's a bit of a different perspective, but there's kind of the adage of you don't take advice from someone who you wouldn't trade lives with. And I think that's way on one end of the spectrum, but it's one thing to have different mentors for different aspects of your life. So maybe you have someone who you look up to in terms of how they're able to manage their family and their relationships. They're able to not just be successful in their career, but also have a great family life. That's something important. Also, maybe fitness. So for myself, I get a lot of that influence actually from the content creators that I listen to the podcast for, that I watch their vlogs, and I think that's something that people need to kind of keep in mind is, who you're spending your time with. Like, you're the result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It might be one of the creators that you follow on TikTok. If you're watching someone stream, you're spending a few hours with them a day. That's probably more time than you're spending with members of your family. And so it's just important to keep that in mind, not to put that out there. But going back to your background, so walk us through this. So you were at Citi, you were in the private bank, you went to sales and trading, and then at this stage, that's when you then went to NYU to get your MBA.
Yes.
Why NYU? Why an MBA? Did you feel that you needed it? It seems like you were having some great trajectory in your career. You were making things happen. Why did you decide to make the commitment to get the MBA? And then also, do you think it was worth it?
Oh yeah, that's. I think that one's always a tricky one. I think especially being a recent guy graduating about almost 2 years ago from business school. I would say the MBA for me. I think everybody has different reasons on why they have an MBA. I'm not going to be an advocate and say everybody needs a formal education and everybody needs that. I mean, I thought for the MBA for myself, I'll be honest, I always wanted to live in New York City. I think being a finance guy, it's different when you work in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, or I worked in Chicago, right, on Wacker Drive, where you still have a lot of the banks, but it's a huge difference in perception when you're working at the head office. You feel like you're part of this empire that doesn't sleep versus being at a regional post. It's a little bit different on the feeling. So for me, the MBA program was a way for me to allow to move to New York City. I did want to move to the buy side, and I felt that I needed some more of the concrete skill sets under my in terms of valuation, financial modeling. And I also looked at the MBA as kind of a hedge career-wise, in the sense that if I ever wanted to do something by myself, I felt having that MBA brand would open up the network, would allow me to sort of, over a period of time, sort of compound that. I think in terms of the MBA being worthwhile, I think the MBA gives you a lot of resources. I think most of the top business schools have the same set of resources, have strong alumni, but it's really up to you as a student to use it. And I look back at a time at NYU where I got to intern at all these great investment firms, got to learn different styles, and that itself was an education. Where for 2 years, lack of a better term, I looked at it as 2 years where you could build yourself, harness it. And even when I look back in terms of the MBA program, especially being out on my own as an entrepreneur, it's those marketing classes were useful. You think of strategy classes. I remember Oaken's entrepreneur class. So a lot of those classes which may not have been directly applicable to, say, if you were stuck in a high finance or consulting career path, actually turned out to be much, much more useful.
Well, my question coming off of that is, you obviously you're doing your own thing now. You're on your own. You have a portfolio of a lot of different things that you're working on. That's a very non-traditional path. Did you kind of have some inklings that was something you wanted to do before business school, or was it after going through those classes, seeing the opportunity there, that then maybe that's what pushed you into kind of this portfolio of things that you're doing?
I would say, I realized in finance, like I always wanted something new, something where I'm constantly learning.
Yeah.
And over a period of time, I realized the only way you're going to get that is by being an entrepreneur.
Sure.
By being out on your own, collaborating with different creatives that are business owners, but doing something of your own. And then two, what I always being out on your own, I think the hardest part was, getting used to not having a paycheck, right? It's a little different where, you have to, everything is on you when you start off by yourself.
Right.
There's quite a lot of administration and I think logistics there, but I think for me the decision was clear because every way I looked at it, I said, if you're in a job, the job's going to be mundane. Sure, you might work with bigger clients or you might work on larger deals, but at the end of the day, it's the same skill set. You're not really learning more. And I think being an entrepreneur allows you that creative freedom. You get to choose what you want to work on.
Yeah.
It's on your time,
sure.
your schedule. And how I got into doing so many different things was I like different projects and one thing led to another. So, for my social media content, right, on LinkedIn, for example, I use a creator out in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And when I first started working with him, right, it was more of a one-way street, right? He was showing me how I should build content, how I should phrase it, and just the whole social media landscape, which posting on different sites, it's it's daunting to manage that schedule, what content you cover. So how I got connected with him was he reached out to me, and I had a lot of partners who I thought would benefit from his services. So kind of one thing led to another, and I realized all these small different things I do, as random as they seem on paper, everything's somewhat interconnected.
Yeah.
And it was another way to sort of deepen the relationships with a lot of people in the industry.
Yeah. No, I think that's fascinating, and I think I can relate to a lot of that just through my entrepreneurial journey on YouTube and building out this. I've learned a lot that I wouldn't otherwise have any exposure to in the day job, and I'm very grateful for that. MBA, you've gotten that now. A lot of people say, being an entrepreneur is so much more valuable than going and getting your MBA. There's a bit of a,
it's a debate.
So now the fact that you have the years of experience being an entrepreneur, being out on your own, but you also then have the MBA. From your perspective, where do you think you learned more? Was it the MBA, or was it now this entrepreneurial journey that you've had?
Ooh, I think that's a tough one. I would say definitely learning more being on my own, because it forces you to apply things in reality. I mean, principles are great, right? You should have foundations. You should have an understanding of how everything works.
Yeah.
But you never know how everything's going to work until you start.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I started, Headstart Careers, right? I was always passionate about career coaching.
Yeah.
Always liked mentoring, and I truly thought, we could do it in a better way. I remember when I first started, first 2 months, it was zero revenue. And I was like, all right, what am I doing wrong? Am I positioning myself in the right way? And it was a huge learning curve because I had to learn, you can use LinkedIn Sales Navigator better to target people. Maybe this is the way, how do you build a sales pipeline?
Right.
Right? What does that customer journey look?
Yeah.
And some of these things I know for a lot of the viewers who maybe aren't entrepreneurs would think are pretty simple and like, follow this pipeline, follow this strategy. But when you're an entrepreneur, every little detail you can change.
Yeah.
There's no rules necessarily per se.
Yeah.
So I felt that was a huge learning experience. I think business school, where the learning experience took place for me, where I still thought it was valuable, was the actual internships during the school year, having that opportunity to almost try out everything.
Yeah.
You could, kind of in a quote unquote safe zone, right? Where no hard faults, like you learn something. If you're right fit, that's great. If you're not, but I think that's the advantage of business school.
Yeah.
But I think when I look back, I think it's more, being an entrepreneur on your own. And it could be even having your own side hustle, right? While you're working full time, you could be having your small project on the side. And you could still get that sort of learning experience.
Yeah. So you mentioned it there earlier. New York is a different animal than Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, Chicago. What are some misconceptions, though, that maybe you had about working in finance in New York City, working on Wall Street, although most people are not, on Wall Street anymore, it's all in Midtown here. I'm just curious from your perspective, because you had that experience working full-time elsewhere, what were some of those misconceptions that were proved, to be a little bit different than what you thought?
Sure. I think, the conception I always would joke, my younger brother would say, you can't say you work on Wall Street unless you're in New York, right? Even though you're working for a bulge bracket bank, and it is a very different pace of life, right? Los Angeles, even Chicago. Chicago's a little bit more closer to sort of New York feel, but it's a little bit, you get that Midwestern, sort of little laid back culture. I'd say the misconceptions I had I think working on Wall Street is that I think the cultural shock was when I saw a lot of my friends who are analysts living in the city, their apartments. Getting used to the fact that you have to have roommates, or most people have roommates.
Yes.
I remember one of my friends who she now is on the buy side, but I knew him at Citi. He was an investment banking analyst. And I remember once I crashed into the place and he was like, we don't really have a living room. Like we have a small little couch to sit on, and here's the TV. And I was like, all right, hey, each to his own. This was down on like the Lower East Side, and this was years ago, before the pandemic. But that was like a sudden shift. And then I think too, I just felt like New York City, it's just the amount of distractions around here.
Yeah.
Just from the fact that it's 24/7. You can go out at any time of the day.
Sure.
There's so many different people you can meet, different friends. You have to always prioritize. I thought New York City would be, I thought being such a large city that you wouldn't run into people. And over the years, I realized it's much smaller. You see people in different social
especially
events.
here in Murray Hill.
You're in Murray Hill. You stay in certain pockets of the city, and it gets a little bit more so. And I think that the third misconception I had was in New York City, that everybody wanted to stay in finance long term.
Sure.
I would say a lot of times when I work with a lot of early and mid-level professionals in finance, I think there's been a huge cultural shift over the last couple of years of people wanting to do something with meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And I think it's been kind of interesting to see that shift, because of being on the West Coast, going to UCLA, most people went into finance to go into venture capital or entrepreneurship, right? You use that 1 to 2 years experience. It's interesting to kind of see that now kind of rotate more into New York now, where a lot of people are seriously looking at, VC or entrepreneurship to kind of have a way to build something of their own. Yeah.
I think that's also something that post-COVID a lot of people have reflected on. You saw that a lot when they were at home. They thought, is this really what I want to be doing with my life? And so I think it's just been an interesting transition to see that. And just touching on the first thing you mentioned with the apartments, the flex rooms is definitely an adjustment.
That was the first one.
And these are people making good income, and that's what I still have to wrap my head around. Is my friends in Atlanta and Miami, the rent that they're paying is so much less. And it's one of those things, it's risk and reward. There's a lot of other benefits to New York. Although we're looking out the window and it's absolutely ugly out today. But totally hear you on all of that. Speaking again just about kind of finding that fulfillment, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You help people with that kind of in your mentorship business now, in terms of helping people find their next career. Is that something that you see a lot of? It's people who are doing it because they want to find something that is a little bit more tangible and they feel fulfilled? Or are they just trying to make more money? Because it's like, you just touched on that you're seeing this trend, but is that something that you're observing with the clients that you work with on the career consulting, or is it more so just something you've observed generally speaking?
I think something I've observed generally. I mean, at the end of the day, I hate to say it, a lot of people join Wall Street because they're motivated by multiple reasons, but I'd say it's money. I'd say second probably is prestige, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people feel it's a prestigious job, and working at any large bank or an elite boutique firm in the city. And I think the third reason why a lot of people do it is, okay, if you're studying business or finance in your undergrad, a lot of your friends are going to work on Wall Street, so you have to feel that, hey, I want to still be part of that social circle.
Sure.
Like, you want to relate to people. You have to be kind of in that world.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, there's, any job you do or whatever you do in life, right? Let's broaden it out. Whatever you do in life, you have to have a sense of purpose or meaning.
Yeah.
Like, there are some people who, their purpose and meaning is being an investment banker.
Sure.
That might be, I think, 1 in 100. Like, there are certain people. It reminds me that there's one close friend of mine who was a couple years younger, but we're part of the same student club at UCLA. Like, he was one of those people that he just loved financial modeling. Like, he loved teaching people. Like, you knew that was his calling in life. He's now on the buy side out here in Greenwich, but the fact is, you could make out that was his passion.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, once you cross a certain point in your life, where you have enough savings, you have the basics are covered.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And finding the passion. And I think the hardest part, especially when you're trying to mentor individuals and help them with that direction, most people don't think about like what makes them happy, right?
Yeah.
What do you like to do? What motivates you to get up in the morning?
Yeah.
And it's hard because you have to strip out all the money, how society views you. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, in this day and age, they define themselves based on their job. Right. They define their friend circle thinks about them because of the job. Yeah. I would say that's, at the end of the day, it's just a job, right? Job comes and goes. Who you are as a person, that's forever. And so I think, post-pandemic, like you said, I think people have become a little bit more introspective.
Yeah.
I think it's just challenging because it means, finding your purpose also means sometimes uprooting yourself from your kind of social circle and surrounding, which is difficult.
Yeah, no, I like what you said there is that a lot of people don't know what actually makes them happy. They think, oh, I'm really happy, playing golf. And it's like, okay, it might be kind of hard to make golf your living. It's not impossible, but it is something to reflect on. And that's something that I had to do when I switched from consulting at KPMG to the role I'm in now. I looked at what I'd be doing for the next 20 years of my career, and I was like, is this actually something I want to be doing? And that was a bit of a wake-up call when I realized it wasn't. And just even that exercise, Ali Abdul, he's a great creator. He always says it's a good exercise to go through, thinking, if money weren't an object, if you didn't have to worry about money, what would you be doing for fun? Like, what would your life
I think that's a great way.
If you had $100 million and you're not investing it, what would you be doing for fun? What would you be doing as your career? And are you a teacher? Are you a podcaster, a writer, whatever it may be? I think that's just a really useful thing to realize what makes you happy. It's like, if money weren't an object, what would I be doing for fun? And that could kind of help you figure out what that is.
I would say, my advisor, one of my advisors, I have many, but one of them, has been really instrumental in changing my value and belief system over the last, 2 years, going down this entrepreneurial journey. That's how he always tells me. He's like, imagine you have the money, like, what is there? What's gonna make you fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
What are you gonna be excited about?
Yeah.
Sure, there are gonna be some chores, right? I mean, for me, I'll be honest, I hate doing taxes. Even like there's certain things that are necessary evils, but what makes you motivated? And I realized for me, for coaching, like even when I was super busy, having 6-7 sessions in a day sometimes and coaching different individuals, I realized I was like, at the end of the day, I like what I do.
Yeah.
There's a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
You're helping people, you're guiding them on their journey.
Yeah.
some people need a rude wake-up call.
Sure.
Others, you can organically take it there. But I think the hardest part I faced after leaving finance in New York, and it was completely changing my friend circle group.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not going out with the boys, out drinking in the West Village. So still do occasionally. There's some good days there, but
sure.
it's changing a sense of circle. So I mean, for me now, that means like going to a lot of Andrew Young's events, right? Tech events in the city, right? Meeting a different crowd of entrepreneurs, people who are really following their passion and beliefs.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people think passions and beliefs, okay, sounds trivial, it sounds wish-washy.
Sure.
But when you have your passion, you're gonna go above and beyond.
Yeah.
You're gonna push yourself. You're gonna make that turn into a reality.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are so afraid that they don't want to be true to themselves. And I think I think over a period of time, it's just, you have to naturally do it. It takes a little time, but having that right guidance is key.
Yeah, well, you spoke about how your friends can change, and I think there's a lot to that. You have different seasons of your life. That's something that Sacco Bloom always mentions, where you have friends who were great friends in high school and college, and they're great for that season of life. But then, if you're trying to build a business, maybe it's a different set of friends, and that's okay. I think too many people think that it's wrong to kind of see it from that perspective, but everyone has to go through phases. But speaking about the friends and the network and the relationships, how do you find your network? How do you build relationships? How do you build your network post-grad? Because I think a lot of people think about when they're in school, it's easy to reach out to someone at a company and say, hey, I'm at the University of Florida, I'd love to learn more about your role. But it's a little bit of a different ask when you're already in a role. How do you kind of advise people to go through that process, even if you're not trying to find a different job, but just the importance of building your network? What's your advice to someone to continue to do that even once they're in a role?
Exactly, I think that's key, right? You have to constantly build your network. And I think a lot of people make the misconception, if I'm building my network, that means I'm leaving my job or I'm looking for a career change. That's hardly from it. I look at building a network as going to the gym, right?
Sure.
Or getting a workout in, or watching Netflix. Like, it should be a routine part of your life.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people who are slightly introverted, don't want to do it, there are different forms of networking and so forth. So I'd say, at a large company, I think going always to the social events is always good. I mean, I think it just gets you a different set of people.
Yeah.
I think in New York City, there's so many different events that fall in your interest, right? So I have friends who are part of a run club.
Yeah.
I have other friends who, everybody's into the whole pickleball,
of course.
pickleball craze. Getting slowly into that myself, but for me, I love playing golf, right? So I'll go with a couple of friends, and I've gone to meet other people. So I'm consistently going to Chelsea Pier. At the same times, you're meeting other people.
Right.
Organically. I think meeting people in a more social sort of function or setting is easier than sending an email saying, I would love to speak with you, let's catch up.
Sure.
I think it just makes it a little bit more easier. So I think in New York City, I think it's following your interests and your activities and hobbies. I had one friend who met a lot of artists and so because she wanted to leave finance and work in an art gallery. And she was artistically inclined, so she would take pottery classes, painting classes. So there are a lot of ways I think you have to put yourself out there. And I think a lot of people make the mistake that if I go to an event, I have to meet every single person, meet a couple of people, slowly start building that relationship. And don't, I would say, always go into it, try to build friendships.
I think it's for myself. I go to a good amount of events, and I try not to put too much pressure on myself. I think a good exercise is to say, okay, I only want to talk to 3 people, and then I have permission to leave. And of course, if you actually go through with that, you're on your 3rd person, you're like, well, I'm actually having a great time. And you always kind of stick around. I think it's important to give yourself permission, give yourself a bit of a goal, because otherwise it can be super daunting. And even just what you said about building your network, you see it kind of like going to the gym. I totally agree with that. And your network is the type of thing, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's like you want to have the network before you need it. You know, you don't want to be in a position when you just lost your job or you're not content with your role, and now all of a sudden you're trying to build your network. It's one of those things that you're grateful for, you know, down the road. It's most useful down the road, and so just having that long-term perspective is super important.
I would say I agree. I was like, networking is like investing in yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's how I look at it, and you know, especially being on my own, I said, you know, I'll be honest, like I go to the same haircut salon, right? I get my haircut done at the same place for the last couple of years, and it was funny because a couple of weeks ago, you know, my barber was connecting me to different business owners who wanted some, you know, finance help.
Sure.
So you never know where things are and how things are interconnected.
Yeah.
And it was kind of shocking to me, actually, you know, when my barber was connecting me to people, but you know,
everybody has to get a haircut.
Everybody has to get a haircut. The way I look at it, it's a necessary. And my barber knows me well enough, so I think a lot of people see me online. Sure. And I kind of grow out my hair. My barber knows I'm the sort of person I only come when I really need it. Absolutely have to. Otherwise, I usually wear a baseball cap. But my point being is, you know, networking can take place in so many different ways. Like even when I've flown back to Asia, you know, speaking to other people on my flight, you know, it can be done, you know, as long as you have a genuine intention.
Sure.
And people feel it's genuine. I think networking is pretty straightforward and becomes really organic as a process.
So I know you've hired a few people onto your team now, and that's a big step. You know, because it means you have to give up not ownership in an equity standpoint, but you're used to having control over everything. It's a lot to give up your baby. I'm curious kind of what you look for when making those hiring decisions. What are you looking for in employees? And how can people listening to this try to replicate those things that make them a more attractive candidate when they are applying for those roles?
Sure. I mean, I think when, I think it was most daunting, you know, Headstart Careers was my baby. You know, I have other businesses and so forth where, you know, I'm a part ownership stake, which is a little different because, you know, there is a team, decisions are made consensuously, but I would say my education and career coaching and, you know, guiding people I think to the right path that they're passionate about. It was tough because the first year I did it all myself, right? Like you're out there coaching everyone, you're out there helping them in every aspect, so you have full control. But you know, rightfully so, as you grow and as you mature, you have to replicate the process. So for my career coaching business, what I always look for were people that are genuinely passionate about coaching. Like they really are going to put in an effort. You want to really guide someone. It's not just taking a 20-minute call and calling it a day. You know, it's really giving that personalized, customized advice. And what I always did, because I was so careful, I would always bring on people on a trial basis, just to see how they coach, and I'd listen in on the calls. But it's been so great. So like, as you know, our close mutual friend, right, Eric, you know, he was someone who, you know, is helping me now on the finance coaching. You know, I have Ben who's helping me now on the consulting side. Just recently brought on a coach with data analytics. So it's daunting because you have to build all these institutional processes. You know, everything changes a little bit. How do you maintain the quality? How do you generate the leads? So it's a little bit more there, but I think identifying someone's genuine interest and passion. And for me, I think what always stood out for anybody I have on the team is they're thinking of creative ways on how we can grow and make a bigger impact. So I would say, you know, I mean, I look at Eric connecting us, right? As one of those ways of saying that, hey, you know, let's connect, let's see what opportunities are out there. I look at my consulting coach, Ben. He's like, oh, Varun, let's partner up with consulting clubs. My finance coach, again, going back to Eric, I was talking to this about Eric. I was like, let's work maybe with GMAT tutors, CFA tutors, right? People who are looking to get into finance. And maybe we can help guide them and navigate through the process. So I think having members of the team who are not just there for the execution sake, especially early on, but they're also there to add creative input.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as you scale past a certain point, you will need people just for execution.
Sure.
I think at least your initial hires should be people who are passionate. So
yeah.
Coming back to your question in terms of how people can stand out in the process, the way you can show passion if you're going, say, down the startup route is, expressing your interest, but also showing them maybe there's a better solution. I remember one of my friends who was applying for a fintech startup. He had looked at the previous competitors they had and kind of did a competitive analysis and said, maybe this is a feature or tool that could be incorporated into the next version of their software. So I think interesting ways like that where it shows somebody you've actually gone through the product, you kind of analyzed it, and you're actually thinking about how to grow the overall company and the overall business, and you're treating it as being an owner.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective on that. My first thing I wanted to mention is kind of the trial run that you said. I had Jack Boudreau on the podcast a few weeks ago. He's pretty big on TikTok. He's building his own fintech. And the way he operates before he hires anybody, and he talks about this in the interview, but he said he brings you on for 10 weeks. And whatever time you can commit, he understands. You might be in a different role, you might be in school, whatever it may be. So he says if it's 5 hours, great. But he's going to judge you based off of what you said you're able to commit. And he gives that trial run to see if people really care. Because sometimes people just want it for the resume, they just want it for the extra income. But I think that shows who's willing to do it for 10 weeks, not paid. That shows who's passionate.
I think that's a great way of doing it. I like that, right? In terms of holding them accountable to their time commitment. I think which is crucial in judging that. I remember even before I brought on Eric as a coach, he was trying to help me with partnerships. Connecting me with different, university partners. He was, and this is mind you, while he was going to, apply for business school, working a full-time job on the buy side, right? Didn't have a lot of time really, but he would make that effort and so forth. So I think I agree with that. It's putting people on a trial run and a trial period, because it is. You don't want to be in a position where you hire a lot of people and fire them. And I could say, as any business owner, it's tough to fire someone. It's a process in itself. And you don't want to go through that sort of cycle, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a brand reputation. There's a reputation that everybody's built, and you want to be associated with the best quality. Which is there. I kind of like that 10 weeks, giving kind of a set, defined period, which gives people enough opportunity.
I think Jack's onto something really great with that. And then one final thing too that came to mind from another podcast with TJ Rogers. He was a public company CEO for about 30 years and had massive success. He said, and this is kind of a common sentiment, but if you're a startup, if you're growing your business, you can't have mediocrity. A large company, the IBMs of the world, I think is the example he brought up. But if you're a large company, you can get away with having mediocre employees. The people who just clock in, clock out, they do what they need to do. That's okay. They can survive. Those companies can survive. But as a startup, when you're trying to grow your business, you need everybody to be able to go above and beyond, who can step up, who can suggest the new ideas. And I think that's kind of what you were saying about the people who are able to come into the interview saying, hey, I looked at your competitors, maybe this is something that we can fix. Because startups, at that stage, you need everybody to be an A player, you need them to be exceptional. And so I think it's just an important thing to remember when you're applying for those roles, are you ready to be that person?
Exactly. Are you ready to step outside of your comfort zone? Yes, you have a specific job responsibility, and every individual that is on my team, they have a specific job responsibility, but you always want them to contribute above and beyond, right? You want people who are aligned to your mission, right? I mean, when I started Headstart Careers, the mission was simple, let's provide great coaching and guidance, right? Keep it as simple. That is our, every company has kind of that vision board and those vision statements. And as a lot of people, it aligns people in a philosophical way. So I think having that is so important in life and in doing it. And I agree, you need A players starting off early on. Everybody has to add that value. And as a startup, you have that advantage of being nimble, but that advantage is only being nimble if you have a great team around you.
Yeah. So I understand, Varun, you've also dabbled in some angel investments. The game of angel investing, some things are winners, some things aren't, and that's what you have to accept. But you've had some good winners so far. How have you kind of approached that? And for someone who hasn't done any angel investing, what are some ways to kind of not just be in those conversations where it's a possibility, but also what do you look for in the investments that you make?
I guess, for angel investing, it's figuring out what sectors you know well. So I always known based on my experience, tech, industrials, and some consumer. I stay outside. I don't touch any healthcare related. I stay away from certain sectors because I'm just not knowledgeable.
Well, the Warren Buffett approach. He doesn't invest in things that he doesn't understand. I think that's probably wise.
Like even if you brought in an expert, and even if it's somebody who you trusted, you still have to feel comfortable with it. And unlike a public position where you can get out of it, you're kind of stuck. And yes, there are secondary markets where you can get out, but it's not easy, especially for an early stage startup. So that's the way I look at it. And then when I look at investing in a startup, I really look at it, I think, in multiple avenues. I look at the team, right? You're investing in the team. Early stage, they're usually pre-revenue or just started generating revenue, but you're really investing in the team. Like the team could have a bad idea, but if you have a good team, they can pivot. Versus having a good idea and having a poor team, there's a lot of execution risk early on. So you want the founders or the early employees to have all those skill sets, right? So having technical skill set, having maybe a bit of the finance, having a bit of the sales, marketing, and operations. So making sure the team is diverse. In that sense. Now, ideally, you're investing in someone who has previous exits, but in most cases, especially when you start off angel investing, you can't be that picky in terms of what you see necessarily. And then I look more on in terms of the market sizing, right? TAM, SAM, SOM, looking at what their market is and how large it is and how reasonable it is to execute that. Ideally, you're also investing in a company that has some tangible barriers to entry, right? Best cases would be, they have some great patents, there's some great tangible value there, it can be licensed or utilized elsewhere, there's some barriers to entry. And then I think the last point really is, in terms of finding those right companies and angel investing as a whole, is just making sure the team gets along well with one another, right? There's that team chemistry, people putting their heart in, so this is it, right? When you're out there, when you're starting a business, this is your primary focus. You can have other secondary items, but this is really it. And with a lot of the angel investing I've done, when I look back at it, it came down to the teams I trusted. I think another huge part that I think especially important this day and age, when I was doing angel investing, was not investing in companies when they've raised a couple $1 million and paying themselves out handsomely. The fact was that they're fully vested. The funds are being the best utilized. And I think communication is also key, right? And you get communication in different ways, right? Typically, most startups will give you once a quarter, right? Or sometimes monthly, but how responsive are they, right? How quickly are they getting back to you? And it's okay if they make a wrong turn and risk a mistake. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but are they at least honest and truthful about it?
I think that's a good point. Tim Vieira, who I just had on for the last episode of the podcast, he's a shark on Shark Tank in Portugal, and he said the exact same thing, where at the end of the day, it comes down to the team, because teams can be dynamic, and so you need the team to also be someone that you can mesh with and that you can have a relationship with. Because when you're investing in a company, especially at the early stage, that's kind of a long-term commitment. And so he kind of mentioned, is it the type of person that you'd be able to grab a beer with? And I think that's just an interesting perspective on that. But also part of the angel investments, and we've seen that a lot now with liquidity. Hank, he's invested in a lot, and a lot of the investments come to you because of your brand, because of your personal brand. For someone who maybe is in the early stages of that, they have the LinkedIn profile with 500 connections, they have their Instagram from college, but for someone who's really looking to build out a brand so that they can be someone who is in those rooms where those conversations are happening, that's something you've done a good job of, and you obviously have an amazing network to even get to this stage. What are some advice that you have for someone to start building a brand in the professional world?
Sure. I mean, I think everybody wants to be known as someone who's reliable, trustworthy, and generally a nice person to work with. I think those are sort of the three key tenets. And I can go a little bit further and saying, if you don't know something, at least being upfront that you don't know something.
Yeah.
There are times when I don't know something, but you know what? I'll tell somebody that, but let me do my own research and continue that conversation later. So then, when I'm a little bit more knowledgeable, at least, I can pick your mind or pick your brain. And then in terms of building out that brand, it comes down a lot to people's perception of you, like who you are. And I think the most important thing is that trust, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times before I think my first angel investment was back at Citi. It was Rapid Replay. It was a sports kind of company, and got sold 5 years down the line to NBC. Which I was surprised because that was the first one. So it's nice to hit gold day one. But I look back what made that successful and how I got built through. I had known those co-founders well. They had a great background. They were super passionate about the project.
Yeah.
And there were people I could trust in the sense that I had my younger brother even intern for them. They needed some help, and my brother spent some time with me in Los Angeles during that time. So I think in terms of building out your brand, it's that visibility. So going to different events, just meeting people, right? Just kind of having those first bases, those conversations, so people know you exist, right? I think that's the hard part today. There are a lot of great businesses, there are a lot of great creators, a lot of great individuals, but a lot of people just don't know you exist. It's like having a great product without any distribution.
Sure.
I think distribution is more key, and you see kind of that difference between, say, a first-time founder and a second-time founder. When I first started, I thought it was building a great product. But then I realized, okay, you have a great product, but nobody knows about you. You're kind of invisible, right? And that kind of forced me to go onto social media, because I said, let me be more visible. I know it's not going to be perfect from day one, but that consistency of showing up day after day and repeating it and getting better and learning from your mistakes. So I think a lot of people just have to have that commitment. And sort of stick to it and know the first 6 months to a year is a rough patch, but it'll get better.
No, I think that's fantastic advice, and we've seen it just now in the last 5 years how your personal brand really can make a huge difference in your career trajectory. Whereas 10 years ago, if you had an online presence or not, no one cared. And honestly, even when I was applying for college, they were like, oh, be careful with even having a public Instagram account, even if it was totally normal pictures of you playing basketball. It was like, oh, colleges are looking at this, but now it's like that is an asset instead of a liability, bringing the finance terms in. But, I think that's great advice. Speaking of personal brand, we're going to wrap it up, but where can people follow you? Where can they support what you're doing? Where can they learn more about Headstart? All of that. This is the time to give your spiel.
Oh, I love it. I get my little rant at the end, so I appreciate it there. So I'd say for Headstart, for us, it's mostly LinkedIn, right? We pride ourselves on being an education brand, so people can always DM me on LinkedIn. Do get DMs on Instagram, but I would say I like it on LinkedIn. It's really just following us at Headstart Careers. We're constantly trying to help people in every stage of the career, whether it's a student who wants to come into the industry, who want to learn what's available, whether it's a professional who is 2 to 3 years in finance or consulting and just making to make a pivot. So we're kind of look at us as kind of the back end engine there, and for us it's always fun working with people, right? We always look at it as, okay, what works better, how can we constantly improve, and I think we're super excited going forward that we're going to have group coaching. right? We want to have people in a more, different learning methods, right? Even when they're casing together, doing it in a group way. So, you're building that community, so to speak, which is going to be our main focus this year.
Yeah. Well, perfect. All of that information will be right on the screen and in the description. So, Varun, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it, man.
Learned a ton and can't wait to keep cheering you on in the future.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.